Hello, underachievers! That was very enthusiastic. So yeah, you know what this video is about. You've read the title, you've seen the thumbnail. Today we are going to talk about unpopular trans guy opinions. And those are unpopular opinions about trans guys and the trans guy community. I feel like that was self-explanatory. But yeah, I asked you guys to send in these opinions, and today we are going to be reacting to them and saying whether or not I agree with them or disagree with them. And also, I'd like to hear your opinion about my opinion on these opinions. Or maybe just your opinion on these opinions. That's what the comments are for, the opinion box, I feel. But please make them nice. I feel like the trans guy community has been prone to beefiness, and not like this kind of beefiness, this kind of beefiness. But yeah! Let's get on to it. The Slur voice is not real, and even if it was, sounding trans is not inherently bad. I agree, sounding trans is not inherently bad. If you are unaware of what the Slur voice is, a good few years ago, this phrase was more popularized and spread on YouTube. I don't know why this rumor started and why we believed it, but there was this whole idea that if you started on testosterone and you started on too high of a dose, your voice would be all funky. Forever, permanently. The Slur voice kind of just sounds like nasally, I guess. I think it's kind of to do with the fact that, like, the majority of cis men, they speak from their chests, and the majority of people raised as girls speak higher from their throat. And then when your voice drops, maybe some people still speak from their throat when they've gone on testosterone. I don't really know. It was a really shitty thing to be spreading, I guess, especially, my personal experience with it. This whole Slur voice thing was, you know, really popular when I had just started testosterone. And you know what's really cool? When you just start testosterone and you're really self-conscious about the changes that you're experiencing not happening really quick. Do you know what's cool about doing that in front of an audience is that on any testosterone update video, or on literally any video, people would be leaving me comments like, "Oh, I hope you don't get the Slur voice. Oh, is that the Slur voice I can hear?" Some people would just type Slur voice. They'd just do it, which made me incredibly self-conscious, and I'm sure, like, thousands of people were made self-conscious about it, because, like, why does it matter how your voice sounds? People go on testosterone and get happy that their voice drops. They don't need to be told that they've got a weird voice. But yeah, sounding trans is not inherently bad, and also, there are cis people with the Slur voice, so let's just not. I think trans healthcare should be accessible, even if the regret rate was as high as people thought. This one is spicy. It's a bit spicy. Yeah, I agree. Before you go crazy in the comments, if you're a TERF or something, studies into the rates of detransitions all agree with the fact that there is not a crazy amount of detransitioners. I think the last study I read was that the rate of detransition was less than 1%. And what's really interesting, if you actually look into it, the majority of people that do detransition do so because they don't have support. And that kind of makes sense, right? Imagine coming out and everyone being a to you because of it. I feel like you'd be less likely to want to be like, "Oh, I'm just gonna stay like this. You know, just keep coming with the hate." I also don't understand why it's such a controversial... I do. People hate trans people. I just feel like if you're on your deathbed and you were told by a doctor, "Hey, we could do this treatment to you. It's 70% successful. There's a 30% chance that, you know, it won't be." Would you want to try it? Of course you would. So why is it that because there's like 1% of people that detransition, the whole world thinks that nobody should be able to transition? And yeah, even like this opinion says, even if it was as high as people thought, it's still less than like a quarter of trans people detransitioning. Healthcare should be accessible. I'm having top surgery tomorrow and it's just scary. And not exciting at all like everyone is saying. I'm happy to finally take that step, but I don't enjoy the fact I'm cut open. I mean, yeah. I hope your surgery went well, by the way. But I mean, maybe this is an unpopular opinion. I don't know how the majority of people feel when they go in for top surgery. I wasn't nervous at all, to be honest, which I think is weird. But yeah, of course there's gonna be people that are stressed out. I don't think you're crazy for being worried about being cut the f*** open. I'd say that's pretty normal. White trans masks with lots of other privileges, money, etc. could do with shutting up a bit more. Okay, I feel like we should be uplifting POC voices more. I agree with that. I'm not sure about shutting up. This is my job. But yeah, I get the point. There is a big issue with diversity when it comes to the trans mass community and the non-binary community. I feel like the stereotype of a skinny, white, Twinkie looking person is kind of what people think about when they think of trans masks or non-binary people, and that is a problem. As a skinny white trans mask, I will try and do better. If someone has secondhand dysphoria, that is something that they are doing to themselves. So this one is interesting to me. If you don't know what secondhand dysphoria is, the way that I would describe it is when you are trans and you have dysphoria and you look at another trans person and the way that they present themselves or the way that, you know, they come across to the world gives you dysphoria. I agree with this opinion, which may be unpopular. I myself have had experienced secondhand dysphoria, and I can completely admit that that's entirely down to my own, issues with dysphoria. If you see a trans guy in a dress with, a bigger chest, and that gives you dysphoria, maybe you should kind of think, hey, what the f*** has this got to do with me? Nothing. Secondhand dysphoria has been, a big cause for hate in the trans community. And yeah, realistically, it's a personal problem if you can't look at another trans person without getting dysphoric. And it's not to say that you can, control that feeling. I know there's a lot of internalized transphobia within our silly little brains. But, again, that is a mental health issue that you have yourself. It should not reflect badly on other trans people. Some trans masks hate teeth, but they're actually... Yeah, this is weird for me, I think, because when I was starting testosterone, I feel like the overwhelming consensus was that, trans guys enjoyed the idea of having a teeth. If you don't know what a teeth is, when you start testosterone, your bits down there, they grow a bit into a tiny looking thing. They look different from, before testosterone. It grows. But back in my day, I feel like that sounds a bit wacky, but I feel like the consensus was that the majority of the people that started testosterone and got teeth enjoyed it because it differentiated their bottom parts and it looked different than how it did before, and how it looked before, they may associate with being a female. Personally, it's not something that I think about every day and get happy about. It's not like I'm excited that there's been growth down there. I personally like it. I would prefer to have it rather than not having it. Cause yeah, it makes me feel, not like other girls. I'm sorry. I am not like other girls. But yeah, when I look down there, I don't think, oh, that's a lady part. I think, oh, that's, that's something going on there. I don't feel very safe around queer cis people. They don't understand. Is this unpopular? I feel like this kind of makes sense, especially with, the climate of, the LGBT community nowadays. If you didn't know, there is a lot of transphobia within the LGBT community, and I know the T is in the LGBT, but somehow I feel some people don't understand that. I think it makes sense, maybe, for some people to not feel safe around cis queer people, because it's not that people are assuming that cis queer people are going to be transphobic. I think it's maybe just that just because somebody is gay and part of the community does not mean that they are supportive of trans people, if you get me. I definitely feel like the trans experience is very different to the experience of that of a cis gay person. And not that one is harder than the other, because obviously it's all down to personal experience and your surroundings, but yeah, there's a lot of hostility towards trans people nowadays. I feel like it's getting worse, and that really sucks. But I think it makes sense for you to feel like that. We don't want to be defined by being trans. I feel like this is not unpopular. We don't want to be defined by being trans. And I know there's gonna be some comments being like, oh, but you make trans videos. You put trans in your titles. You talk about being trans. Yeah, I do. But that does not mean that the only thing that matters about me is the fact that I'm trans. Realistically, I sometimes forget I'm trans. The internet is very trans, and I feel a level of responsibility to talk about my experience and maybe, help other people out with their experiences, so I like to talk about it. But yeah, I feel like most trans people don't want to be defined by being trans, because, at least for me, I'm fully transitioned. I am as transitioned as I'm ever going to be. Being trans to me is kind of, I don't know, it's not that it was a thing of the past, it's more that it doesn't really affect my life nowadays. And yeah, it's annoying when people only think of me as a trans guy. They're just like, oh, he's that trans guy YouTuber. He's a trans guy musician. As if being trans has anything to do with the music I make. Pre-top surgery trans guys shouldn't go topless without nipple covers. Disagree. I don't know if this is an opinion this person holds, but no. I personally would never have gone out shirtless, let alone, without covering, just because, my dysphoria was dreadful. Literally, nobody saw my boobies. Nobody saw my titties. But I don't think because I was extremely uncomfortable with my breastises that other people should be, because, it's their body. Yeah, I feel like we should be able to do what we want with our bodies. Is that not how we feel? Trans guys who don't pass at least 20% of the time don't really have male privilege. Yeah, I agree. I think it's very difficult to experience male privilege if you don't pass, because, male privilege comes from the way that you are treated in society and your place in society, and if society doesn't view you as a guy, then they will not, treat you in a way that rewards you male privilege. This is a very interesting topic to me, because I feel like people think with no level of nuance when it comes to a lot of stuff online, but just because somebody identifies as male and has maybe transitioned, it does not mean that the world treats them as a male. We know that. Doubting yourself right before surgery is normal. It's a lot to go through, 100%. I think it's absolutely normal to doubt yourself before surgery. I feel like maybe it's not a good idea if your mind is constantly filled with doubt to go through with a surgery that, is irreversible, but I think it's normal to have a level of doubt about anything in your life. I can't really say that I doubted, any part of my transition. I don't know, I don't feel like I felt that kind of thing, but I also don't think it's weird to feel doubt. I feel like sometimes it's a good thing to feel doubt because then at least you're thinking about what you're doing. But yeah, I mean, like, going into top surgery, it is not weird to doubt whether it's the right decision for you because, you know, it's a very big thing to happen. I don't think doubt is something that should be criticized and, you know, used as proof that you're not actually doing the right thing. My uncle says that no one would date trans guys and that I'm signing up to die alone. Yeah, obviously I disagree with that, although I don't think this is an unpopular opinion. I think a lot of people think this about trans people. I remember when I finished school, there was a guy that liked me at school, and my friends were, you know, kind of telling me to go for it. I did not like him. There's nothing wrong with him. I just wasn't into him. And my friends were just like, you know, he doesn't even care about the trans thing. He doesn't even care about that. So why would you not? Which is weird to me because it felt like they're insinuating the fact that he didn't feel disgusted that I was trans, that I should just go for him, even though I wasn't into him at all. I feel like a lot of trans people feel unlovable. I feel like a lot of trans people feel like they'll never have successful relationships in the future. And I just gotta say that, like, every trans person I know has been in a relationship. Being trans is not something that will stop people from wanting to date you. Because, you know, why would it be? If you're hot, you're hot. If you're funny, you're funny. If you're nice, you're nice. It doesn't matter what you got going on down there. We should be patient with people still unlearning the hate from toxic FTM transmed discourse. Oh god. Yes, I agree that we should be patient with people for being, you know, elitist and, like, toxic to the trans community because, like, a good few years ago, I feel like the majority of the people in the online trans community had the opinion of transmeds. And it's completely changed within even the past 5 years. And I feel like it's very, very, very easy as a trans person who maybe does not feel that self-confident, who maybe is angry with the world because they're trans. I don't think it's very difficult at all to fall into, you know, an ideology that there is only one way to be trans and that anybody who does not feel exactly the same as you is not trans. I had those opinions a good few years ago. I understand entirely how people fall into those opinions. I don't think we should be excusing people's bad behavior, but I think, yeah, we should be patient. A lot of the time, being trans comes with a lot of self-hatred. And if you're feeling crazy dysphoric and, you know, you get secondhand dysphoria, there's a lot that could go wrong. But yeah, we should definitely be more patient. Trans men can be lesbians. I heard someone on TikTok say this. Now, this conversation, I feel like my opinion on this has changed drastically from when I was younger, but to be honest, I don't really care what people call themselves. I don't care if a trans man wants to call himself a lesbian, just to kind of maybe explain a bit of context for that, because I know it sounds strange. A lot of people in the trans mass community went through, like, decades of life identifying as a lesbian and being a big part of the lesbian community, mixing with lesbians, being in lesbian relationships. And I don't think there's any benefit in telling people what they can and cannot call themselves. I understand it sounds confusing, and I understand the view of, like, people thinking that trans men calling themselves lesbians makes the rest of the trans community look like lesbians and girls, but at the same time, I just think we should just let people do what they want in regards to how they identify. Like, how much impact is, you know, Ricky, who calls himself a lesbian, gonna have on your life? I just think we should chill out on the whole outrage of people identifying with things that you don't understand. If I see a trans guy calling himself a lesbian, I'm not personally hurt by that, because he's not calling me a lesbian. So why would I care? No nipples are easier than getting nipples back on from top surgery, and look way cooler. I mean, getting no nipples when you have double incision it's a lot easier. If you don't really understand how top surgery works, they chop your chest off and then chop the nipples off and then put them back on, but if you don't get nipples, they just chop your chest off and then sew it up. I know a lot of top surgery complications come from issues with nipple healing. I don't think it looks way cooler. I think that's like a subjective thing. I personally like my nipples. I want my nipples, but if other people don't want their nipples, that's entirely fine. I do think it looks cool. Unpopular opinion, we have to put in more effort to pass. I don't know if this is in comparison to trans women. I feel I'm just going to take it down that route. I disagree. I feel like going through a testosterone-based puberty, there are changes that, you know, are irreversible. If I want my voice to go back to how it sounded before I started testosterone, that is impossible. I can't do that. And I feel like a voice is something, you know, that is very easy to latch onto. I know that in the past, before I started testosterone, people would assume I was a guy, but then when I spoke, they'd think I was a girl because my voice was higher. And I think for trans women, if they've gone through male puberty, it's a lot more difficult for them to pass as a woman, because you can't reverse your voice dropping. And in the same way, I feel like a trans guy going on testosterone, the changes that happen with testosterone happen a lot quicker, and I feel like they're a lot more drastic than the changes that happen with a trans woman going on estrogen. But then I also don't feel like there's any point in saying who has it harder, because it's different. But yeah, trans women have it harder. I'm gonna be a hypocrite. NB people and trans people have extremely different experiences. Again, it's very subjective. There are some non-binary people that have transitioned medically further than I have. There are some non-binary people that have had top surgery, that have been on testosterone, and have also had bottom surgery, and their experience can be extremely similar to a lot of trans trans men. But then also, there are a lot of non-binary people that don't want to transition, that, you know, don't socially transition, they don't change their name, they don't change their pronouns. So I guess they would have a very different experience than, say, I would. You know, change my name, coming out, transitioning, you know, medical stuff. That is very different, but I don't think it's possible at all to compare these two in this way, because, like, every trans person is different, every non-binary person is different, and there's no point, because every person will be different. My transition as a trans guy could be completely different to yours as a trans guy. Just because a guy is trans doesn't always mean he's less of a dick than cis men. Yes, I agree with this. It's kind of annoying that I've seen this happening a lot online, but I've seen a lot of cis people saying the kind of thing of, like, I hate men, but not trans men, you're different. The othering is not the aim. But yeah, I don't think being trans or being cis makes you a dick. I know a lot of trans guys go through a phase of feeling hypermasculine and feeling like they have to, you know, be a bit toxic because they see cis men doing that, and they all they want is to be seen as a cis man. Acting gay helps me pass way more than being straight. This is something that I've heard a lot. I've heard of a lot of trans guys who are straight saying that they pass better as gay men, and I feel like it's maybe because of the stereotype that gay men have, like, feminine voices, and they, you know, have, like, effeminate, whatever this is, what's it called? Hand signals. Effeminate hand signals. What is it? Body language? I don't know. I feel like it kind of makes sense. In terms of passing. Passing is just how other people perceive you, and if people have this stereotype of gay men being feminine, and they see a trans guy being feminine, they maybe are less likely to be like, oh, you're a trans guy. Maybe they'll just be like, oh, you're a gay guy, because you're a guy and you sound feminine. I think that makes sense. That does not mean that I think it's a good thing. I just think that is a thing. But yeah, that's the end of the video. Have a good day or don't. See you later, losers. I hope you comment things in the comments and come to my shows, and have a good day. I think I already said that. Bye-bye.